In today's world of 10-speed automatic transmissions, 8-way adjustable traction control, and brake-by-wire systems, it's quite difficult to find cars that offer pure, unadulterated driving experiences. But sometimes car manufacturers throw away the rulebook and give their engineers the keys to the spare parts shelves and total freedom to run wild with ideas. And when the people at BMW were given the chance to do that, they took a 2 Series Coupe body shell, stuck a 6-cylinder engine under the bonnet, grabbed a bunch of goodies from the M4, and this is what they came up with. The first generation BMW M2. And immediately you notice that this car is quite different than the standard 2 Series Coupe. And that's because the M2 is basically an M4 underneath. The rear and front subframes, the entire suspension system, the steering, and the rear active differential are all borrowed from the M4. And that makes this car 69 millimeters wider at the back and 63 at the front compared to the standard car. Then there's a 370 horsepower engine at the front, a manual transmission in the middle, and of course, rear-wheel drive. But the best thing about this car, by far, is the fact that it's mine. All mine. Unfortunately, driving this car around town is a pain. First, there's the suspension. Since the M2 doesn't have an adaptive suspension system, meaning no comfort mode for the dampers, the ride is a tad bit harsh, to put it lightly. You can feel every imperfection in the road and cracks in the road surface which you would glide over with your 3 Series now have to be taken at very low speeds, because otherwise you'd literally feel like the car is about to crack open when you go over them. Then there's the steering, which is a bit on the heavy side even in comfort mode, and it requires a lot more effort to turn the wheel. It's something I've gotten used to it since buying it, but it took a while. And finally there's the manual transmission in the middle that just doesn't work at lower speeds. It jitters, it jolts, and it just doesn't let you drive smoothly at city speeds. As soon as you let go of the clutch, no matter how smooth you are, you'll feel a jolt in the back of your head from the transmission. It almost feels like an involuntary clutch kick. It's so annoying. And also the bite point of the clutch is kind of high, so that doesn't help either. So driving this car around town gives me absolutely no pleasure. And that's why we're now heading outside of Stockholm to find some roads that this car was designed for. N55 engine under the bonnet of the M2 is excellent. It packs a lot of punch, it revs up to 7,000 RPMs, and it sounds, well, just listen for yourselves. inline 6-cylinder unit. It produces 370 horsepower and a maximum torque of 500 Newton meters. And the only downside to this engine is the times we're living in today. Times in which people compare how good an engine is by looking at the internal code given by the manufacturer and not by actually experiencing what it's capable of. I love this engine and I actually prefer it to the S55 unit fitted to the M2 competition because this just feels more old school, it's more raw, and it's just got more character, and that's what I like in an engine. It's a bit laggy lower down in the rev range, as it's only got one turbocharger, but drop a few gears and get it above 2500 RPMs and it is spectacular. I love the fact that it revs all the way up to 7000 RPM without ever running out of puff. And that helps the car accelerate from 0 to 100 km per hour in 4.5 seconds for the manual and 4.3 for the DCT. And on these back roads running through the forest that we have here, all the downsides the car has in city driving turn into assets. The suspension is excellent at speed. It's not what I would call refined, it's a bit on the firm side, it's quite harsh, but hey, this is an M car and this is what you get when you buy one. But it does a really good job at keeping the car glued to the road. The car has tons of grip. You can only get it sideways on public roads. If you really go off the limit, the front end bites really well into the tarmac, and that makes this car so easy to throw around corners at insane speeds, and it's just a lot of fun to drive. But my absolute favorite thing about the M2 is the steering. It's electric, obviously, but it's really well set up by BMW's engineers. I'm not going to compare it against a hydraulic unit for obvious reasons, but it does really give you much more feedback from the road than a steering column in a regular BMW, for example. It's really quick to respond to your inputs, it's perfectly weighted, and it's really precise. Now, obviously, the fact that this car is rear-wheel drive helps a lot with that, because the only job the front wheels have to do is steer. They're uncorrupted from power going to them or anything else. To make up for moments when the car lacks steering feel, the M2 makes up for it with chassis feel. That essentially means you're also receiving information through your butt now and not only through your hands. So you really need to recalibrate yourself if you're used to just driving cars with hydraulic steering systems. And in my opinion, that's not a bad thing at all, because if the M2 has a strong point, then that's the chassis. If around town I kinda hate the spec I chose for my M2, out here and on the track, it's sublime. Those three pedals down there, the stick shift in the middle, and the inline 6 engine at the front make you feel very involved with the driving experience. You really have to work in order to extract the performance from this M2. And if you're more old school like I am, after driving this car, you're never gonna go back to an automatic. Trust me on that one. The car has 3 driving modes: Comfort, Sport and Sport Plus. I have a detailed video on that topic and you can find a link to it in the description down below. But the mode I use most frequently when I go out for a drive is Sport Plus. Because in this mode you get the best throttle response from the engine, the steering weights up nicely, and the traction control is less intrusive, but it's still there to help you in case you do something stupid. It's a pity there's no dedicated button to turn off the throttle blipping, but it's a small price to pay for what you're getting in return. But if you're feeling brave enough and turn off all the systems, that also gets rid of the throttle blipping. One other thing I really love about the M2 It's sheer simplicity. There's only 4 colors available. This is the only alloy wheel design you get. Black is the only interior color you can get, and there aren't many options to choose from. And that's because BMW finally focused on the only thing they do best, which is the driving experience. You can tell as soon as you start it up and drive it away. This car is all about the driving, because I bet you wouldn't be able to tell this interior apart from an M240i or a regular 2 Series Coupe M Sport for that matter. The seats are identical, the dashboard is the same, the dials, the infotainment system, everything is basically untouched from the standard car. The only giveaways are the M logo that flashes up when you start the car, the blue stitching on the seats, and if you're a real M car fanatic, the steering wheel. That's it. All of the money spent on this car went straight into tuning it for the road. And I think that makes it quite a special machine. And for sure that was the thing that made me want one the second BMW unveiled it in 2015. I've been very lucky to be able to drive all the current M cars available on sale, including the monstrous M5, and even though the M2 doesn't have a proper M engine, whatever that means, and even though it's the least powerful of the bunch and it lacks some of the features its bigger brothers have, I can honestly say this is the best M car I've driven so far. And the only other car that can change my mind on that is the new M2 competition. So if you have one and you live in Europe and you want to let me drive it for a couple of hours, message me. So that's it, guys. These have been my driving impressions of my 2018 BMW M2 facelift. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cartoon for a lot more content to come. And until next time, take good care of yourselves, and I'll see you around.